Weysan Dun, thank you very much for joining me today and welcome to the channel.
Thank you, Matt. I'm pleased to be invited.
Let's jump straight into it, and I would like to ask you to provide me a bio of yourself.
Certainly. I am a retired special agent of the FBI. That's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That is a federal law enforcement agency in the United States. I spent 30 years as an FBI agent, and the last 10 years of those, I was in the Senior Executive Service, which is the highest ranks within the FBI. And during those 10 years in the Senior Executive Service, I served as an inspector and then as the special agent in charge of 3 different FBI field offices. A special agent in charge is the title that the FBI uses for individuals who are chief executives of an FBI field office. So that would be the equivalent of a superintendent of a police agency or the chief of police or an equivalent rank. So during my 10 years in the SES and my 9 years as a special agent in charge, I was in charge of the office in Illinois, which covered the state of Illinois with the exception of Chicago because it had its own field office. Then I was the agent in charge of the, the New Jersey field office based in Newark, New Jersey. That field office is responsible for the entire state of New Jersey. I was able to end my career in my adopted home of Omaha, Nebraska, where I served as the special agent in charge of the Omaha field office, which covers all of the state of Iowa and the state of Nebraska.
Great. Tell me about the awards you've received.
I was fortunate, I think, because I worked very hard and fortunately was pretty good at what I did. I received numerous recognitions during my 30-year career with the FBI. Probably the one that I am the most proud of is I was designated a Presidential Meritorious Rank Executive. That is an honor bestowed by the President of the United States, and it recognizes the top 5% of federal executives. So it's federal executives across the entire U.S. government. And it recognizes the top 5% who have distinguished themselves with sustained achievement, accomplishments, and leadership.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit more about the cases you worked? If they're confidential, please don't shed any light there. But just generally speaking, whatever you can tell, it would be really great to hear.
Well, certainly. I was very fortunate. During my 30-year career, I was able to either directly be involved with or have executive oversight of virtually every FBI program. And when I was the special agent in charge of a field office, I was responsible for all the investigations ultimately in that field office. So I have a pretty broad base of experience in the FBI. In terms of the programs where I probably had the most direct involvement, I would say that would be investigations of violent crimes, things such as bank robberies, extortions, kidnappings, and the like. That would also include investigations of organized criminal gangs. And then I also had extensive experience when I was at FBI headquarters overseeing both organized crimes on a national basis, as well as national security investigations, which includes both counterintelligence and counterterrorism. And then finally, I had a fair amount of experience with public corruption investigations. Those are investigations of people in official positions who betray the public trust and engage in criminal activity or other activities that are prohibited.
And what prompted you to become an FBI agent? And was this always a dream since you were a little boy? How did that start? Can you connect the dots maybe?
Well, you guessed correctly in that it was something that I was interested in from quite a young age. When I was growing up during my formative years, and I grew up in the rural Midwest, so with that backdrop in mind, in those days, many of the popular television shows dealt with people in public service, dealt with law enforcement stories, uh, television shows such as Dragnet, which featured the Los Angeles Police Department, television shows such as the FBI, obviously about the FBI, were quite popular. And like many young people of that age, I was watching those shows, and I thought that it would be a very interesting and rewarding career. Also, I was influenced by a number of adults, a number of adult role models during my formative years. I was very active in the Boy Scouts, and a number of my scout leaders happened to be law enforcement officials. And because they were individuals that I respected and I viewed as role models, that further increased my interest in law enforcement. But I will share with you one story, which, and I'm not sure why I felt this way, but my mother used to tell me that when I was quite young, well before I joined the Boy Scouts and well before I met, people in law enforcement, and frankly, well before I started watching television. So when I was quite young, less than 5 years old, my mother would often ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my response always was, according to my mother, I want to be a policeman during the day and a fireman at night. And she always found that interesting. So I have no idea why I would say that. But so apparently from a very young age, I had an interest and a desire in being in some type of public safety position.
That sounds really interesting. So, what career advice or what advice in general would you give someone that would want to pursue a career as an FBI agent? Is that possible? Is it harder than it was back in the days? Any tips or pointers you could give to someone?
Absolutely. The FBI is very difficult to get into. It's very competitive. Now in the current social environment here in the United States, there has been a fair amount of criticism periodically of law enforcement. And some law enforcement agencies have seen that affect the number of their applications. The FBI has not. Every year, even in years where law enforcement seems to be criticized a lot by the media or by the public, the FBI has always had a very, very large number of applicants. That continues to hold true. And as a result, the FBI is very, very selective. So, several things if one is interested in a career with the FBI. First and foremost is don't get in trouble and don't do anything stupid. Because in order to be hired by the FBI, you have to go through a very extensive background investigation. They will literally investigate your entire life up to the point where you apply. So what they look for is examples of character, integrity, trustworthiness, good judgment, etc. So that's what I tell young people. If you aspire to a career in the FBI, or for that matter, any agency where you would have a security clearance or have access to sensitive information, know that a very thorough background investigation would be conducted before you're hired. So if you do anything stupid, illegal, anything that would reflect poorly on your character and integrity, it will probably be discovered, and it might preclude you from joining such an organization. So first and foremost, stay out of trouble. Secondly, people ask me, is there a particular field of study or particular work experiences that would better position one for being hired by the FBI? And the answer to that, surprisingly for many people, is no. The FBI has such a broad area of jurisdiction. It has so many different federal violations over which it has primary jurisdiction that the FBI needs and seeks out people of all backgrounds, all academic backgrounds, all work experiences. For example, of my own personal friends, personal colleagues in the Bureau, some came from a law enforcement background. Some came from a military background, which was mine because I went into the military after I got out of college. Others came from business backgrounds. Some owned their own businesses. Some worked for corporations. Many people come from a legal background, either as a defense attorney or prosecuting attorney or some corporate attorneys as well. And we have other people from very diverse backgrounds. One of my good friends and colleagues, who is also, or who was, he's retired now as well, but who was a senior executive like myself, had been a high school band director, and his career had been spent in music and teaching before he joined the FBI. And there are actually a lot of former school teachers in the
Oh,
FBI.
wow, that's really odd.
Yeah. So almost any background can potentially position yourself well, because what the FBI looks for, again, is people who have demonstrated leadership, who have demonstrated self initiative, who have high integrity, good interpersonal skills, and a lot of self initiative. So, any career field where you can demonstrate those things could potentially position you well to be in the FBI.
Okay, that's some good advice. Maybe I should apply as well.
Absolutely. By the way, we do have a number of people that came from a media background. And I will say that regardless of your background, when you join the FBI, initially you will be trained for all types of FBI investigations. And typically, a very young agent will be assigned to a variety of investigations to help the individual gain a breadth of experience. But if you come in with a specialized background after your first few years, typically the FBI will find an assignment for you where your specialized background would really be of great value. So, for example, those individuals who join the FBI from a media background may end up as the public affairs person for a field office, or may end up at FBI headquarters in the public affairs division, where they either do things such as write articles, edit articles on behalf of the FBI, work with television and movie production companies on stories about the FBI and the like. If you come in the FBI, for example, with a science background, again, after that initial period of orientation and the opportunity to develop a breadth of experience, you may end up being assigned to the FBI laboratory, where your science background, of course, would be of great benefit. So people of all backgrounds are needed, and people of all backgrounds can be competitive as long as they have established a good track record of accomplishment.
You mentioned you had some role models in your life. Who were the most important people while you were growing up, and how did they shape you as a person or influence?
Um, that's a great question. I think obviously my parents would probably be the most important, because they are the ones that shaped my basic character, if you will. They are the ones that imbued in me the qualities that I think have carried me well through my life. Some of those qualities, everything includes being a person of good character, maintaining one's integrity, maintaining the courage of one's convictions, but also the attitude of always working hard and doing your best, no matter what you are doing. And even if you are assigned to do what may be viewed as a minor or menial task, that you should still apply yourself and do your best. So I think my parents obviously had the greatest influence on those types of characteristics. But in terms of my career field, I would say I had a couple of Boy Scout leaders and later leaders in the U.S. There is a program called Explorers, which is for teenagers who are too old to be in the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. Those individuals included some people from the law enforcement profession. There was several local police officers that were in those roles. I also interacted with supervisors from the state police in my home state, and even on occasion, the local FBI agent would be involved, as a guest speaker or as a guest host for certain events from these agencies. So I was very impressed with those individuals, and as I mentioned earlier, I had always had an interest for some reason in law enforcement and public service.
Okay. I assume being an FBI agent, you must have faced numerous challenging and difficult situations throughout your career. How did you deal with those situations? How did you overcome challenging or difficult times in your career or in life in general?
Um, that's another great question. I mean, first of all, there are different types of challenges that I encountered in my career. Some were external challenges. In other words, the challenges posed by what the criminals were doing, what the people we were investigating were doing, and perhaps in some cases what they were doing to try to intentionally thwart our ability to successfully investigate and develop evidence. But also, as with any organization, there are internal challenges. Sometimes there are bureaucratic challenges that you have to try to overcome to accomplish something. And sometimes there are career challenges. Um, as one example, I decided relatively early in my career that I hoped to advance into management and supervisory ranks. Because although I really enjoyed conducting investigations and was apparently quite good at it based on the fact that I received many accolades and promotions, I felt that I could perhaps have greater influence if I were to move into senior management. But part of the challenge there, then, of course, is first of all, you have to get noticed by the people who are going to be making those promotions. And you also have to make sure that you acquire the breadth of experience that will qualify you for those. So sometimes that can be challenging. As one example of that, one of my first steps into the senior executive ranks was to try to become an inspector. That is considered a senior position, but it's also considered an entry level executive position. So the inspector is the individual who, on behalf of the FBI director, goes out and conducts internal audits of field office or headquarters office operations to look at management efficiency, management effectiveness, things of that nature. It's a very difficult position to get into. And one of the ways that you can potentially get qualified for that is that while you are, before you join those ranks of inspectors, you can volunteer for and get selected to participate in inspections on a one-time basis. So, for example, you can say, "Well, I'm qualified to do an inspection. I would like to join the team for this office or for that inspection." So, I volunteered and participated in many, many inspections before I was actually selected to be an inspector. And many people would have given up. It's first of all, these inspections, you're not selected to participate that frequently. So it takes often many months, if not many years of effort. And many people give up after, maybe 3 or 4 times saying, well, I'm probably not going to make it to inspector. And, there's no, I'm just going to go do something else or try some other career path. In my case, I really wanted to be an inspector. So I probably volunteered for, was selected for, and conducted, I would say, 2 to 3 times the typical number of inspections as a part-time inspector before I was finally selected to that position full time.
Okay, very interesting. And what is a piece of advice you've received that stuck with you throughout your life and why?
I think, and I'm not sure who I received this advice from, but it is something that I have embraced and a piece of advice that I give to all the people that I'm in a position potentially to mentor and even to colleagues, and that is um, comport yourself in such a manner that if whatever you do ends up on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post, that you would not be embarrassed having your closest friends and relatives read about what you did. And particularly if you are working in a position such as the FBI, I think that's very critical. I jokingly tell people that's the New York Times front page test, but I always say, whatever you're thinking of doing, think about, okay, if this ends up on the front page of the New York Times, how will I feel about my friends and relatives reading about it? And if it is, as long as you're comfortable with it, then you have to let your own judgment be your guide.
Okay. I assume as an FBI agent, you have to be very disciplined in order to get results and reach your goals. So, what's a habit that had a positive impact on your life, and how did you develop it?
I think for me, attention to detail was something that was very valuable, both in my career as well as in my personal life. Um, and I'm not sure where I developed that, but even at a young age, I was always one who noted all the small details and remembered them. As an FBI agent, that is critical because when you're conducting an investigation, a small detail or a small fact that may appear insignificant initially can later have a tremendous impact on a case. So, attention to detail, I think, would be one thing. I think another thing is just a natural inquisitiveness. Some people would say I ask too many questions, frankly, but I'm always, whenever I'm confronted with a situation or dealing with a situation, for whatever reason, I always have questions about, okay, why are we doing it that way, or what happened to cause that? So that natural inquisitiveness, I think, served me well also.
And looking back at your life through professional, personal achievements you've acquired over the years, is there anything you wish you could go back and do differently, or were you quite happy and satisfied with how things progressed?
I mean, overall, I'm quite happy and satisfied. I feel like I've been very fortunate. I've had a great career. I continue to serve in a variety of positions, even though I'm retired, where I can continue to have an impact and be of benefit to my community. But in terms of things that I wish I had done differently, there are a couple, and I suspect many people would resonate to this. I grew up in a bilingual family, and I am bilingual. But when I was young, my parents tried to teach me how to read and write Chinese. I do speak Mandarin Chinese somewhat fluently, but as a young child, I was really not interested in doing extra work after I finished my homework. So, despite my parents' best efforts, I never learned to read or write in Chinese, and I regret that. I wish I would have, because that would have been useful both in my career, I think, as well as just in my personal life. And then the other thing is, like many children, my parents tried to get me interested in becoming proficient with some kind of musical instrument. I, like many, I suspect, my mother arranged for piano lessons when I was young. And once again, I just had no interest in that when I was growing up. So I dutifully took the lessons, practiced when I had to, but really never gave it the attention that I should have to develop any proficiency. And now, for example, when I go to some type of social event and somebody is able to play the piano quite well and entertain all the other people at the event, I think, I could have done that, but I should have, but I chose not to, I guess. So those are a couple things that I think many people probably, when they're young, their parents tried to get them to do that for whatever reason at that period of their life they were not interested in.
Okay. And if you could compare it maybe to your times, do you think the society in general could do something differently? But at the same time, do you see um, any particular challenges that make maybe the youth a worse generation?
Absolutely. And for me, that's an easy one. I really think growing up in the current times with social media is very, very difficult. I mentioned earlier that my advice to people is don't do anything stupid. Well, when I was growing up, if you did something stupid, unless it was really, really outrageous and in fact ended up on the evening news or in the local paper, typically the only people that knew about it were your closest friends, the people that were involved with you in whatever that silly activity may have been. Nowadays, with social media, for whatever reason, young people seem to want to do outrageous things on social media because it attracts likes or it attracts views or whatever. It's the current currency for popularity, if you will. And I think that becomes very challenging because whatever you do on social media, as you well know, is out there forever. Anyone and everyone can see it. And I think many young people now fall into the trap of saying, "Oh, well, this is fun. Let me do this, or let me try to match that YouTube challenge, or let me post this to see if I can attract more likes or attract more views." And that, first of all, can backfire if you want to seek a job such as working for the FBI, where your integrity, your character, your background, and your comportment are in fact scrutinized. But also, I think it's a challenge because it makes it even harder for young people to feel like they're measuring up. I mean, I remember, when I was younger, and I suspect young people are the same. Everybody wants to be popular. Everybody wants to be part of the in crowd, and that's probably a term that nobody ever uses anymore. But when I was growing up, everybody's goal was to be part of the in crowd. Part of the cool kids or the popular kids. And again, when I was growing up, that meant selecting the friends you wanted to be with and doing the things that they wanted to do and being good at it. Well, now, to be popular, it seems you need to be an influencer. You need to have, a lot of YouTube views or TikTok views, whatever your chosen platform is. And again, it makes it harder for people to keep up. Because instead of keeping up appearances with your local circle of friends, young people now are really competing with or comparing themselves to people around the world. So, somebody growing up in the rural Midwest, as I did, on TikTok, maybe saying, wow, look at what that person's doing. And that person happens to be living in Paris, London, or LA, or New York. And they try to equate their life or measure up to what they're seeing on social media, which also, by the way, is usually not the way people really live. I really think most people's persona on social media is not what they're really like. So I think that creates challenges. It makes it tougher for young people to feel like they are measuring up to whatever standard they aspire to. And it also, I think, prompts them to do things that may be regretful later in life, more so than what I faced growing up.
Okay. And do you think then the society can do something about this, or are we too far down the line to control it?
I one of the other things I believe in is never say never. I think it possible. I think it can be controlled. How, of course, to do that is the big challenge. Some would advocate for stricter government regulations. And while that may be the correct solution, I know that there are an equal number who are opposed to that, saying, well, that infringes on, constitutional freedoms and people's rights. I'm somewhere in between because I think that certain increased regulations, especially with regard to social media and youth, probably would be beneficial. And I think it could be done in a way that does not infringe on one's rights. I liken that to other consumer protection laws. We have laws about the age at which young people or which people in general can buy tobacco. We have laws restricting the age at which people can buy and consume alcohol or even possess alcohol. So having similar laws with regard to some of the more corrosive social media platforms would be analogous to that. But the other thing I think that is important, and this may even be more difficult, is that we need to, as a society, return to some of the basic values that we had. values such as maintaining the courage of your own character and not falling victim to the latest trends and fads. And that starts in the home. And I think one of the challenges we have now is, when I grew up, it was very unusual to have families with two working parents. Most of my peers and myself always had at least one parent at home. And back at that point in time, it was usually the mother. Most moms were stay-at-home moms back then. You see far less of that now. Many, many young people now are growing up without the constant presence of parental role models. And I don't know how we reverse that trend, but I think we should try to return to a little bit more emphasis, I think, on values and on character development, both in our school systems, but also in family lives.
Okay. I do agree with your point. That's very important to have at least one parent looking after the child. But personally, I think it would be very impossible, not being negative here, to enable a parent to stay at home and look after the child, considering a lot of external aspects. Like, so there would have to be a huge input from the government to support those individuals where one person could sustain a living for a family. I mean, the cost and everything else
Right.
skyrocketed.
Absolutely
And
right. You're absolutely right.
and I agree, the values are very important, and it starts from home, taking those out and be more responsible, more educated, know how to have manners and be, and generally speaking, acceptable of your surroundings and everyone else. Um, yeah, but it's very hard. I see it as well. I see a lot of parents working because they want to achieve a good life for their children, have a house, have a comfortable life, and it drifts away. The years are disappearing very fast, and yeah, it impacts in a way those children that they are going to the social media channels and trying to find inspiration, and that inspiration is not necessarily positive because in a way they've been brainwashed that you have to be rich, successful, good looking, and all the materialistic things have more value than the actual real values of living in a society where we each other accept. There's no hate, there are no differences, and people are trying to find those differences
Very well
in
stated.
races, in
Yeah.
relationships, in religions. And so we're focusing more on the aspects, what the differences are between us, than finding those alignments that we are actually the same people, and we should be looking for similarities in each other, and kind
Yep.
of would
Absolutely.
unite us. So yeah, um, that's just a thought from my point of view, but yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
very
totally
interesting to
agree.
look at.
I think you and I share a similar societal outlook. Uh, and I do agree. It would be very hard. I mean, in today's economy, in most places, it's at least in the developed world, it's very difficult to maintain an adequate lifestyle or a middle class lifestyle on one salary. But that brings up another question is what truly is the middle class lifestyle? I think over the years we've had a bit of a creep. When I was growing up, for example, you were considered middle class if you had one car. I remember in my neighborhood, all of the homes had a one car garage or no car garages. Now, it almost seems like you're not considered, or people don't think you're successful unless you have multiple cars, unless everybody in the family has their own car. So, and again, I understand why, because we have become an increasingly mobile society, and communities have spread out. It's very rare that you can walk to anything now. Um, but that's another example of how it's harder for, I think, the current generation growing up than for my generation.
Mm. So on that note, what would you say is the key to a successful and fulfilling life? looking at your times, looking at those times, is the fine line that if someone reaches a certain age and looks back at life, saying, okay, this is actually the real meaning and purpose, and that would be a fulfilling life.
That's a very that's a question I think that it means very different things to different people. So what to me is meaningful may not be meaningful to someone else. But for me, speaking of myself, I am most proud of, and I get the most satisfaction in terms of looking back and seeing what types of positive impact I have had on the community. What things have I done that made whatever community I was living in a better place? And that was one of my goals in terms of going into public service. So in some cases, it's very individual. I mean, for example, during the course of my career, I was involved with overseeing and directly supervising a number of kidnapping investigations where young children of wealthy families were kidnapped and held for ransom. Fortunately for me, all the cases I was involved with were resolved successfully, and we rescued the victim and also arrested the kidnappers and recovered the ransom if it was paid, and so on and so forth. And when people ask me what were some of the most rewarding moments of your career, I have to say one of them was being able to walk into a room with anxious mother and father waiting to see the results of what we did, and being able to walk in the room carrying their 5-year-old child and handing the child to the father. So that was very rewarding. And then, of course, there are other cases where the impact that I'm proud of was greater. As an example, when I was a supervisor of a gang squad in Hartford, Connecticut, this would have been in the middle 90s. There were some very serious gang problems in certain neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods literally were ruled by the gangs. One of the most outrageous cases we had was a gang that became so powerful in the neighborhood that they actually set up a makeshift toll booth, and residents who wanted to get back to their homes in the evening or leave their homes in the morning to go to work literally had to pay a toll to these gang members to get in or out of the neighborhood. And of course, the neighborhood, was dangerous. It was deteriorating. People, once they got home, they stayed home. Nobody was outside. Because of our successful investigation of that gang, we thoroughly dismantled it. We arrested something like 20 of their leading members. Many others were charged as well. And I was able to go back to that neighborhood 6 months later. And it was dramatic, the difference. You could see children playing in the yards. You could see people outside talking to their neighbors. And it was very satisfying to be able to go back and say, you know what, at least in this case, we were able to give this neighborhood back to the residents and take it out of the clutches and control of the gang.
Okay, very interesting. And do you still have access if you want to go to the bureau and speak to people? Can you still go back and visit others, or are you now dismissed and you're not allowed to visit anyone and talk about the sensitive stuff?
It's somewhere in between the two. I no longer have access to the sensitive stuff. I no longer have a security clearance, but I can go visit the local field office, however, or any field office for that matter. But however, when I do so, I have to be invited in. I can't just walk in like I used to do. But I have maintained contact with many of my former colleagues who are still working. Also, I'm very active in the Society of Former FBI Agents. It is a official recognized nonprofit fraternal and educational organization. I'm very active in that. I currently serve as a regional vice president in the Midwest for the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI. So because of my role as an officer of the society, I still have access to two colleagues in the FBI. Now, for example, coincidentally, just 2 weeks ago, I was actually in Washington, D.C. for the annual board meeting of the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI. And part of our annual board meeting involves going to FBI headquarters and meeting with the director of the FBI and the deputy director of the FBI. And we receive briefings from some of the assistant directors of different divisions of the FBI to really let us know what the current state of affairs is, and more importantly, to let us know how we, as former FBI agents, and how the Society of Former FBI Agents can help support the FBI. So, when you're on the job in the FBI, we often refer to it as the FBI family or the Bureau family. And when one retires, one is still part of the family. You're just not as active, and you have to be invited to go to certain events. You can't just go if you want to. You have to be invited. But the FBI does welcome and does a good job of staying engaged with its former employees who wish to remain engaged.
Okay. What are you doing now? I mean, have you thought of becoming maybe a private investigator, or continue using your skill set for other means, or you're just enjoying your life now as it is and just relax?
Well, I don't know. I am definitely enjoying my life. I don't know if you could describe it as relaxed. My wife would certainly say I'm not relaxing enough. Um, what I chose to do is to apply my skills, my career, and my contact to other initiatives, not to seeking another job, but to other initiatives where I felt like I could still have an impact. So, for example, I am now a commissioner of the Nebraska Crime Commission. That is an official state job. I'm appointed by the governor, and I have to be confirmed by the state legislature. In Nebraska, it's called the unicameral. So I had to be confirmed by the unicameral after the governor appointed me. But it is a non-paid position. The Crime Commission in Nebraska consists of a number of individuals like myself who are appointed by the governor, and most of us have some sort of criminal justice background. And then we also have some community representatives. But what we do is we oversee police training and standards for the state of Nebraska. And we also oversee the police training academies and administer the federal and state law enforcement and criminal justice and victim assistance grants. So that keeps me active. I still interact with many of my colleagues because of my role as a commissioner on the Crime Commission. And then the other thing that I'm very active in is I am a leadership volunteer for the American Red Cross. The American Red Cross is a nonprofit, independent organization. It's not part of the government, but it is chartered by the U.S. Congress to provide humanitarian aid during times of disasters. So for the American Red Cross, I am a volunteer partner to our regional chief executive. So I assist her with really running the region, helping plot strategy, helping maintain liaison with other government agencies. And I find that quite rewarding because many of the skills that I used when I was in the FBI are equally relevant when you're talking about working with emergency management and disaster response agencies.
Okay, so you've still got a full plate of things to do. So it's not a retirement then.
No, I just don't get paid anymore. So, but I enjoy that because in answer to one of your earlier questions, for me, what gives me the most satisfaction is having an impact, and that's why even in retirement, I look for things to do where I feel like I can have an impact. I've been on different boards as well, boards of directors of different nonprofits and of different organizations. And again, the boards that I choose to try to join and serve with are those that I feel like can have a positive impact on the community and can influence something going on in the community.
That's really noble of you, getting involved in so many things. Okay, let's move to the final question. What would be your final words of wisdom to pass on to younger generations? Anything at all?
A lot of things come to mind, but I think probably the one that I think would be the most valuable and the one that I think helped me achieve whatever I've been able to achieve is never give up. You know, never give up. Keep trying. If one thing doesn't work and it's something that you really aspire to, try another way to get there. So never give up would be my advice to pass on.
Thank you so much, Weysan, for giving your time, sharing your experiences, stories, and wisdom. I really, really appreciate.
Well, I applaud that. I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm honored to be invited to be on your show, and I think what you're doing is very valuable.